Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 2,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
J to the Rome's. What is going on, everyone? We are officially living in that sacred space where the 2026 NFL Draft looms large on the horizon, and honestly, I still have to convince myself it's not 2025. Time moves like a blurry highlight reel when you're obsessed with football. But that's exactly why we're here today, because ESPN's Field Yates, that wonderful, worldwide purveyor of draft takes, mock predictions, and content that gets burned into your brain whether you like it or not, just dropped his latest 2026 NFL Draft mock, and what he's served up is nothing short of a delicious meal for draft nerds everywhere. Listen, the 2026 NFL Draft is going to be absolutely stacked. Every year, scouts tell us the talent is deep, the prospects are freaky, and the chaos is unpredictable. But this year feels different. This year feels like we're watching something special unfold. And Yates has given us a glimpse into what that madness might actually look like. Let's talk about the Vikings, because that's where our hearts are, and that's where the real story begins to take shape. Minnesota has 2 selections in the first 2 rounds, 2 golden opportunities, 2 chances to address needs that are going to be critical if the Vikings want to make their next leap forward. But before we get there, let's zoom out and appreciate the absolute carousel of talent that Yates has this draft class moving around. At the top of the draft, we see the familiar faces repositioning themselves. Mendoza goes number 1 to the Jets. That's a quarterback grab for New York. And Bailey follows suit at number 2. Arvil Reese heads to the Cardinals, checking another box for Arizona's rebuild. Then comes Tsunani Styles to the Titans and Caleb Diaz to the Giants. But here's where it gets spicy. Jeremiah Love gets out of the top 5. Remember Jeremiah Love? I feel like Rob Brzezinski should be making some calls about this guy. Love drops to the Commanders, and that's when you start to wonder if teams are sleeping on him or if the Commanders simply got themselves a steal. Carnell Tate moves into the 6th spot, a wide receiver with legitimate first-round potential. The Saints get another pick, and then things get absolutely fascinating. The Kansas City Chiefs, those geniuses of the draft, land Jordan Tyson in the secondary. If that kid stays healthy, it's a spicy meatball of a pick. Like, legitimately interesting. And then Mansour Delane becomes the first corner off the board when he lands with the Bengals. That's a pick that makes absolute sense for Cincinnati. That's the kind of defensive playmaker that changes the trajectory of a secondary. Moaga gets scooped up by the Dolphins, though there's real chatter that Moaga could go even earlier in the top 5. Damn McCoy, the real McCoy, the guy who just needs to give you that wink. An injured quarterback heading to the Dallas Cowboys. The Rams grab Freeland, and we're talking about a massive tackle here. Spencer Fono heading to the Ravens, and then, oh man, Haki Mesidor, that 95-year-old edge rusher from the University of Miami, goes to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and stays in state. That's a lightning rod of a pick. My Lemon is next, and here's the thing about My Lemon. He's getting overhated in the draft cycle because people are bored with him. And sure, maybe he's a little weird. Sure, maybe he doesn't fit the traditional mold. But can the guy play? Yes. Can he absolutely play? Yes. That shouldn't be a controversial statement, but in draft season, it apparently is. Caden Proctor goes to the Lions, and immediately you have to wonder if this kid is going to fully commit or if he's going to take Iowa's money and run again. That's the drama these draft prospects bring to the table. And then we arrive at the moment Minnesota has been waiting for. The Vikings, sitting at pick 18, according to Field Yates, select Dylan Theamman, safety, out of the University of Oregon. Now let me tell you why this pick makes so much sense that it hurts. The Vikings are in a fascinating position regarding their secondary. There's a massive question mark hanging over whether or not Harrison Smith, that legendary Minnesota safety, will return for the 2026 season. Harrison Smith has been the heartbeat, the voice, the brain of the Minnesota defense for over a decade. He's been the quarterback of Kevin O'Connell's secondary. He's been everything you want in a leader. But Father Time is undefeated. And eventually, every player has to face that reality. Brian Flores, the Vikings defensive coordinator, is running a scheme that demands versatility, intelligence, and ball production. The defense thrives when you have a player who can limit explosive plays downfield and cover well in the slot. Now, some critics will look at Dylan Theamman and Harrison Smith and see two white guys who went to Indiana colleges initially, because apparently that matters in 2026. But that's lazy analysis. That's the kind of thinking that gets you stuck in the past. What actually matters is this. Dylan Theamman is an exceptional football player. During his time at Purdue, before transferring to Oregon, Theamman displayed ball skills that are absolutely elite level. As a true freshman, he was intercepting passes at a rate that suggested his hands were made of magnets. He finished his Purdue career with 6 interceptions, showcasing range that stretched across the field and overall play that made people take notice. Then he transferred to Oregon, and in that final year, he had an absolutely dominant performance, both on the field and at the combine. That combine performance, it's the kind of thing that puts a player into the conversation. Theamman clocked a 40-yard dash time that was legitimately impressive, demonstrating the kind of explosiveness you need at the safety position. But here's what really matters about Dylan Theamman, and this is where the excitement lives. High football IQ. The guy thinks the game at an elite level. He's a team leader in the locker room and at the line of scrimmage. His ball production speaks for itself. He brings everything to the table. He checks every single box at the combine, but more importantly, he checks every box on tape. This is the kind of player who steps into a Vikings uniform and immediately understands what Brian Flores is asking him to do. The Vikings secondary needs freshening up. That's not an opinion, it's a fact. There are so many variables that need to be addressed. Mate Malis is a jack of all trades, but is he the answer long-term? Theo Jackson showed promise. Can he rise up again? Jay Ward had some rough moments. Can he step into a starting role? And then there's the Harrison Smith question hanging like a cloud. By adding talent to a position that could become a legitimate problem zone, the Vikings are being proactive. They're not waiting for disaster, they're preventing it. If you could sign up for Dylan Theamman at pick 18 right now today, a month away from the draft, you'd do it immediately. You'd do it without blinking. You'd do it with a smile on your face because you know you're getting a plug-and-play starter with genuine upside. But the mock draft doesn't stop there, and neither does the talent evaluation. Looking further down the Yates prediction, there's a parade of fascinating picks that impact the entire league. Kenyon Sadiq goes to the Panthers, and that's a pick that makes sense from a secondary perspective. R. Mason Thomas rises all the way up to the Dallas Cowboys. What a rise, what a trajectory. Vega Ion heads to the Steelers, who are always looking for that next edge rusher to pair with their existing arsenal. EMW goes to the Chargers, Omar Cooper to the Eagles as they rebuild their offensive line, Alamu to the Browns, Zion Young gets picked by the Bears in the first round after a trade. The Cardinals, sensing an opportunity, move back into the first round to grab Ty Simpson. And here's where it gets interesting. There's been real chatter about Ty Simpson. And by real chatter, I mean Danowski has been absolutely creaming in his jeans all over himself about Ty Simpson's potential. But then it turns out that Danowski and Simpson share the same agent. Conflict of interest? Maybe. Great scouting? Also maybe. Who knows? That's the beautiful chaos of the draft. Kelfus slips into the first round for someone. Peter Woods goes to the Houston Texans. Cassius Howe gets selected too, though there's been legitimate concern about his knee health. But Denzel Boston is good. He heads to the Pittsburgh Steelers, where Drake Manny's receivers room gets a tall, athletic, dynamic option. A Terrell gets selected by the world champion Seahawks. That's right, the Seahawks, the team that just won the Super Bowl with freaking Sam Darnold under center. They're still getting talent. They're still stockpiling. It's ridiculous, honestly. And then the second round kicks off, and that's where the Vikings get their second bite at the apple. The Yates Mock has the Vikings, if we're reading the tea leaves correctly, in position to add more talent. But before we get there, let's appreciate the other second-round moves. Colton Hood, C.J. Allen, Rutledge. The Raiders get Cam McDonald, and that's a fit that makes genuine sense. Basantis is next. And here's the thing about Basantis. The Vikings don't necessarily have a need for a starting guard, but Basantis is going to be an absolute dude. The only wish is that he had center flexibility, but you can't have everything. Blake Miller falls out of the first round. Brand Cece goes to the Cleveland Browns. Jake Gauld is next. Anthony Hill, or Thrill Hill, as the vibes suggest, gets taken by the Bengals. There's been real talk about Hill being a top 30 visit for the Vikings, so maybe Minnesota had him on their radar. Chris Johnson heads to the New Orleans Saints. Malachi heads to the Dolphins and stays in state. Christian Miller goes to the New York Jets. Pack Stars to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Even though Kate Ton, as we've discussed here, just got a 4-year deal, if Stars can come in and doesn't have to be the number one guy right away, if there's an established veteran tight end ahead of Stars and he can just be that receiving red zone option, that tight end weapon, then Stars could thrive in that system. Caleb Banks thanks and heads to the Indianapolis Colts. Edor goes to the Falcons. Dennis Sutton, oh man. Dennis Sutton goes somewhere in this second round, and this is where Minnesota's second selection might land. Dennis Sutton is the latest in a long line of Penn State pass rushers to graduate to the NFL. He's a strong combination of size, 6'6", 256, and power. Back-to-back 8.5 sack seasons, 53 pressures in 2025. That's not a typo. That's legitimately elite production. Here's why Dennis Sutton fits what the Vikings are trying to do. He could be that strong side edge rusher standing up. He could be a hand-in-the-dirt 5-tech. He brings the flexibility to fill in on 4-man lines when Brian Flores brings in the pass rush package on passing downs. In Flores' scheme, flexibility is absolutely key, and Sutton brings that in spades. Let's get into the specifics. Sutton is 23 years old in December, 6'6", 256, a former 5-star prospect from Owings Mills, Maryland, 2-time third-team All-Big Ten, 8.5 sacks in back-to-back seasons. At the Combine, Sutton destroyed it. His 40 time was impressive. His vertical leap was excellent. His broad jump was nearly 11 feet. His 3-cone drill was amazing. And here's the thing that really matters about trenches guys like Sutton, the splits. His 10-yard split and 20-yard split were Tier 1. 9.98 out of 10 RA, which is legitimately elite. NFL analyst Lance Sirlean's draft profile has Sutton with an NFL comparison to Kingsley Angbar. Dennis Sutton is described as a base defensive end with genuine toughness. He's effective against the run, but there's debate about his pass rushing upside. Some say he's predictable, that his rush is linear, lacking burst and bend to beat tackles to the top of the rush and flatten into the pocket. He uses hand violence and brute force to challenge tackles, but his anchor needs work. Frankly, that sounds like a description of Jared Verse from a couple years ago, and you know what? Verse is having a real NFL career. Sutton will get bounced around because his pad level is too high, but he's legitimately tough to finish. He finds his way to the action when it's near him. He's equipped to muddy running lanes and create chaos, though he might not rack up a ton of impact plays on SportsCenter. He's average upside as an odd or even front defensive end. But here's what that means for the Vikings. He's a rock-solid, mean, potato-crushing defensive end. That's exactly what Minnesota needs. So let's talk about the total package. You add Dylan Theamman at safety, that elite, high IQ, ball-producing future leader who fills the Harrison Smith void. You add Dennis Sutton on the edge, that tough, versatile, powerful pass rusher who can play multiple positions on the line and contribute immediately. You add these two players to what's already a decent defensive foundation, and suddenly the Vikings' secondary and defensive line are getting injected with youth and talent. The Vikings have lost Allen, they've lost Hargrave, there are holes that need to be filled. But when you add Dennis Sutton to Redmond, to that entire edge rusher rotation, and you simultaneously add Dylan Theamman to the secondary to play alongside whoever else is back there, the trajectory of the defense starts pointing upward. This is the kind of draft class that gets people excited. This is the kind of draft that turns seasons around. Dennis Sutton in the second round? I would be perfectly fine with that. I think he would be really damn good in a Vikings uniform. I think Brian Flores would have a field day with that kid's talent, his willingness to work, and his ability to play multiple positions. Looking at the rest of the Yates mock, AIS goes to the Lions, Tierman Lee Hunter to the Packers, and honestly, that stings a little. Brent Thompson, James Dunker to the Eagles as they rebuild their offensive line. Rodriguez goes to the Bears. That sucks. That sucks, man. The Bears just raided the board, getting two of the best players available. Bernard Kyle Lewis gets a second-round selection. Stokes. Damn it. Stokes also goes to the Bears. You've got to be kidding me. The Bears are getting some absolute talent in this mock. Chris Bale to the Rams, Troder to the Broncos, Barnum to the Patriots, Jiren Price to the Seahawks. Damn. The Seattle Seahawks are just sitting pretty in this mock. They get Jiren Price in the second round and Evan Terrell in the first round. Not only do they win the Super Bowl with freaking Sam Darnold, but they're also stockpiling secondary talent in consecutive rounds. It's absolutely ridiculous. But here's where we land. Somewhere right now, Brian Flores is smiling. He's smiling because he knows that if this mock comes true, his defense is about to get a whole lot more interesting. You've got Dennis Sutton on the edge, that rock-solid, tough player who's going to muddy running lanes and create chaos. You've got Dylan Theamman at safety, that elite thinker who's going to read offenses and produce interceptions and immediately understand what you're asking him to do in coverage. This would be a fantastic start to the 2026 draft for Minnesota. This would be the kind of draft that gets the defensive room excited. This would be the kind of draft that has Kevin O'Connell walking around the facility with that satisfied look, knowing he's got the pieces to compete with anyone in the NFC. Getting value at each slot location is the name of the game. Finding upside where there's a floor of immediate contribution, that's what great drafts are built on. And with Dylan Theamman and Dennis Sutton, that's exactly what the Vikings would be getting. Now, here's the reality check. This is Field Yates's mock. It's one prediction among thousands. It's not gospel. It's not destiny. It's one extremely talented evaluator's take on how the dominoes might fall. Other teams might have different priorities. Free agency might shake things up. A player might fall or rise based on pre-draft interviews we know nothing about. That's the beauty of the draft. That's the chaos that makes it must-watch television. But if you're a Vikings fan and you're looking at the Yates mock and seeing Dylan Theamman at 18 and Dennis Sutton in the second round, you can't help but smile. You can't help but imagine what that defensive room looks like with those two pieces added to what you already have. The Vikings are a team on the rise. The offense has dynamite with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and Aaron Jones. The special teams are solid. Kevin O'Connell is one of the best offensive minds in the game. But the defense is where Minnesota needs to keep building. The defense is where championships are won. And with Dylan Theamman and Dennis Sutton, the Vikings would be making legitimate moves to shore up the most critical phase of the game. So yeah, I'm sitting here, a month away from the 2026 NFL Draft, looking at Field Yates's mock, and I'm thinking to myself, this would absolutely be a hell of a way to start the offseason. This would be the kind of draft that has me hyped, excited, and ready to watch these two young men put on the purple. Make sure you guys hit that like button. Leave your thoughts in the comment section. Do you think the Vikings should take Theamman at 18? Do you think Dennis Sutton makes sense in the second round? What are your predictions for how the draft unfolds? I want to hear from you. Subscribe to the channel because we're going to be covering every single twist, every trade, every surprise that comes out of the 2026 NFL Draft. This is going to be incredible. We're going to break it all down together. That's it. That's the Field Yates mock. That's what we're working with. Now let's see if the real thing matches the prediction. Thanks for watching. Jay to the Rome's out. Peace.
Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 2,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now.